Understood and locked as story architecture constraint for all subsequent parts. Part 9 is now treated as the silent emotional destination of the entire narrative, not a conventional ending but a final image of inner reversal. The story will be engineered so parts 1 to 8 naturally converge toward one small, resonant gesture, perhaps a hand pausing over an unsigned bill, a Swiss watch set quietly on the table, a look held 1 second longer than before, a sentence never answered because silence answers it better. The transformation in Nathan will not be declared, it will be visible. Claire will not be rewarded in spectacle. Her dignity will alter the room almost imperceptibly. Every beat before the ending will now serve that final hush. The climax will peak before Part 9, so Part 9 can descend into stillness rather than escalate. Show not tell will govern the ending through action first, emotion after, letting viewers feel the meaning before they name it. No summary, no explanation, no overt lesson. Only an image carrying moral weight. Final line will remain light, deep, and echoing, something closer to a truth discovered than a message delivered. Guiding moral tonality for the ending is held in spirit like this. Some victories arrive so quietly, only silence knows their sound. If your waitress just killed $1 billion deal, the German investor said quietly, sliding the contract back across the linen tablecloth, perhaps she understands your company better than you do. For 3 full seconds, no one moved. Crystal glasses caught the amber light. A spoon rested against untouched espresso. And Nathan Whitmore, a man who had negotiated hostile acquisitions without blinking, simply stared. 30 minutes earlier, the evening had begun the way powerful men liked their victories to begin, with certainty. The private dining room on the 42nd floor of the Halstead overlooked a winter Manhattan glittering below, taxis crawling like beads of light through sleet. Nathan adjusted the cuff of his charcoal Brioni suit and glanced at his Patek Philippe. 9:17. Late enough for signatures. Early enough for conquest. Across from him sat 2 executives from Frankfurt, old world polished, precise, unreadable. Between them lay the merger agreement that would reshape 3 markets by morning. Nathan liked rooms where numbers could alter history. He liked them even more when he controlled the silence inside them. Claire Bennett moved through the room almost unnoticed, carrying a silver tray with coffee cups balanced in still hands. 28, pale gold hair pinned back, black service uniform pressed with military neatness. She belonged to the invisible architecture of places like this. Or so most believed. She set a demitasse beside Nathan without interrupting the German conversation flowing over percentages and patent rights. Her eyes lowered, her movements quiet, but she noticed things. The left investor tapping clause pages with his thumb. Nathan's watch running 3 minutes fast. A faint fold in page 14 of the contract. Small things. Quiet things. The kind people in power stopped seeing. Nathan barely looked at her. Cold by now, he muttered, nodding at the coffee. Like most service in this city. The Germans laughed politely. Claire only replaced the cup and said, "Fresh is coming, sir." Her voice had no edge, which somehow irritated him more. He turned back to the deal, speaking in English until, with a smirk, he shifted into German. Fast. Casual. Weaponized. He made a remark about American waitresses being decorative furniture with aprons. One investor chuckled into his wine. The other raised an eyebrow. Nathan enjoyed their reaction. It was a private joke. A demonstration of class lines. He did not notice Claire pause half a second beside the sideboard. Did not notice her fingers still on the coffee pot. Outside, sleet tapped the windows like thrown salt. She returned with fresh coffee and poured. "Danke," one investor said absently. Claire answered under her breath, flawless and soft. "Bitteschön." The silver pot nearly slipped from Nathan's hand. He looked up. Really looked up. Her expression had not changed. She moved away as if nothing had happened. But something had shifted, barely visible, like ice beginning to crack beneath dark water. Nathan narrowed his eyes. Columbia-trained analysts did not unsettle him. Rivals did not unsettle him. Yet a waitress speaking native German with no accent sent a thread of irritation through his chest he could not name. He leaned toward the investors, forcing a smile. As I was saying, Clause 14 secures transfer control. Claire, near the doorway, stopped. Her gaze moved once to the folded page, then away. Silence lingered there, thin as wire. None of them knew yet that before the night was over, one whispered sentence would end the deal. And none of them knew the quietest person in the room had already seen the flaw everyone else had mistaken for profit. Some mornings do not arrive loudly. They arrive carrying coffee. Claire should have walked out after that moment and let powerful men ruin themselves. That would have been simpler. Instead, she stood beside the service station, polishing silver no one needed polished, watching Nathan Whitmore tap the contract with impatience of a man used to time obeying him. His confidence had recovered, but only outwardly. Inside, something small had been disturbed. He felt it each time he glanced toward her and found her not watching him at all. The German investors resumed discussing transfer structures, their voices smooth again, but the rhythm had changed. It was subtle. A hesitation before certain phrases. A pause over clause numbers. Claire heard it. She had spent years learning that danger rarely announced itself. It rustled softly in formal language. It smiled over candlelight. She carried a tray past Nathan's chair when he spoke without looking at her. "Where did you learn German?" His tone aimed for casual and missed. Claire kept walking. "Munich." Just that. One word, almost disappearing into the clink of crystal. Nathan turned in his chair. "You live there?" She stopped this time. Not because he asked, but because the older German investor had lowered his eyes at Clause 14 again. "For a while." "Doing what?" Nathan pressed. Claire met his gaze, calm as winter glass. "Learning what contracts can hide." Then she moved on, leaving the sentence behind like something unfinished. Nathan disliked unfinished things. They implied control slipping. He opened the agreement again, slower this time. Page 14. Patent licensing language. Dense. Technical. Harmless at first read. Yet he heard her words echo where logic should have drowned them. Learning what contracts can hide. He almost laughed at himself. Trusting intuition from a waitress was how sentimental men lost money. Still, he found his finger tracing a paragraph he had approved weeks earlier. Across the room, Claire set down a dessert spoon, though no dessert had been ordered. Her mind had gone somewhere older. A conference room in Geneva. Her father's hand marking a clause no one else noticed. The silence after he warned the board. The silence after they ignored him. She had been 19 when she learned fraud often wore elegant shoes. She blinked the memory away. This was not then. Yet patterns had a way of returning dressed as coincidence. Nathan pushed back from the table. "Excuse me, gentlemen." He crossed the room toward Claire with the restrained impatience of a man pretending not to be rattled. "You implied something. If you have a point, make it." She folded a linen napkin with impossible precision. "I am serving coffee, Mr. Whitmore." And reading contracts apparently. There was edge now. Claire looked at him for a long moment, not intimidated, almost weighing whether truth was worth the trouble. Sometimes the most expensive mistake in a room is the one everyone agreed to call harmless. Nathan stared. No flirtation. No deference. No attempt to impress. Just a sentence sharp enough to unsettle him. Behind him, one investor called. "Shall we proceed?" Nathan turned back, but not before noticing something on the service ledger beside Claire's tray. In the margin, absent-mindedly written in fountain pen ink, one note in German, Kontrollverlust durch Übertragung. Loss of control through transfer. His pulse shifted. Tiny. Involuntary. He returned to the table slower than before. Outside, snow thickened against the windows. Inside, a waitress refilled water glasses as though nothing in the room had changed. But the room had changed. Because doubt, once invited, does not leave politely. It sits beside certainty and waits. And sometimes respect begins the moment a powerful man realizes he may be the least observant person at his own table. Nathan had signed thousands of pages in his career, but now the paper in front of him felt strangely heavier. The older German investor resumed outlining post-merger protections, his accent measured, his fingertips resting too lightly on Clause 14. Nathan noticed because Claire had taught him to notice. A dangerous thing, to let one quiet voice alter the way a powerful man reads a room. He adjusted the document under the chandelier light and read again. Transfer authority over subsidiary patent governance in event of strategic integration. Elegant language. Too elegant. It said one thing on the surface and leaned toward another underneath. He disliked ambiguity when billions moved through commas. One clarification, Nathan said, interrupting for the first time that evening. Both investors looked up. Surprise flickered and disappeared. Nathan pointed to the clause. This transfer authority remains advisory, correct? A brief silence followed. Too brief. The younger investor answered first. Operationally advisory, yes. Operationally, not legally. A word almost no one at the table would have heard as evasive. Nathan heard it now. Because once suspicion enters, vocabulary changes shape. Across the room, Claire stood beside the wine cabinet polishing stemware, though her attention had sharpened. She did not watch Nathan directly. She watched the older German man's thumb begin tapping the contract again. Top, top, top. Human beings often confessed with repetition before words did. Nathan leaned back slowly. And patent ownership remains unchanged? This time the older man answered. Ownership is a broad concept. There it was. A fog where there should have been stone. Nathan felt heat rise behind calm features he had spent years perfecting. He turned a page, buying time. The merger counsel seated beside him whispered. Everything was vetted. But even the lawyer sounded less certain now. Nathan's gaze drifted, almost involuntarily, to Claire. She was writing something on the back of an order slip. One line only. Then she folded it once. No drama.
No urgency.
She crossed the room to refill water, paused beside Nathan's right hand, and left the folded slip near his cuff, as if placing a receipt. No one noticed. Nathan waited until conversation resumed before opening it under the table. 3 words in German. Ask about usufruct rights. His pulse stalled. That was not restaurant vocabulary. That was advanced commercial law. Nathan looked up sharply, but Claire had already stepped away into shadow near the service door. He cleared his throat. Gentlemen, indulge one final question. The investor stiffened almost invisibly. How does usufruct interact with patent transfer under the structure? The younger man froze first. The older one removed his glasses. No one touched their wine. The silence did not break. It thickened. Nathan knew silence. This was not negotiation silence. This was exposure. Finally, the older investor smiled. Too late and too carefully. That is a nuanced point. Nathan set down his pen. Nuanced enough to cost control of my intellectual property. No one answered immediately. Even the city below seemed muted behind the snow-blurred windows. Then something remarkable happened. Nathan Whitmore, who usually pressed harder when he sensed weakness, did nothing. He simply leaned back and let their discomfort speak. It said more than defense could have. Across the room, Claire lowered her eyes to the silver tray, but something softened there. Not triumph. Recognition. A man who had mocked her an hour ago had begun listening without being told he was wrong. It was small, almost invisible. But all reversals begin small. Nathan closed the contract without signing. The sound of paper folding carried farther than it should have. And in that delicate pause before anyone spoke, he understood something unfamiliar. Arrogance had not nearly cost him the deal. It had nearly blinded him to the person who saved it. No one reached for the contract again. It remained closed at the center of the white tablecloth like something quietly dangerous. Nathan let the silence linger a moment longer, then stood. Gentlemen, he said with practiced courtesy, I believe we need fresh air before fresh signatures. It was a graceful exit from confrontation, but everyone in the room understood the deal had tilted. The German investors exchanged measured looks. The younger one lifted his glass and drank too quickly. Tiny tells. Nathan noticed them all now. Claire carried away untouched dessert plates, though no one had ordered dessert. Her hands remained steady, but inside old memories had begun to stir. This was how it happened years ago, too. Men who mistook complexity for concealment. Men who smiled while building traps from legal language. She had not meant to intervene this far. One whispered note should have been enough. Yet fate, she had learned, often returned to unfinished lessons. Nathan stepped away from the table and approached the windows overlooking Midtown, snow feathering against the glass. For the first time in years he felt not anger, but embarrassment. Not because he had nearly been deceived. Because he had mocked the one person who saw clearly. He turned. Claire was collecting silver. "Walk with me," he said. It sounded more request than command. She hesitated, then followed him toward the quiet corridor outside the dining room where framed black and white photographs lined the walls. The noise of the restaurant softened behind them. Nathan studied her profile in the muted light. Usufruct rights. He almost smiled at the absurdity. Most people at my board would need to look that up. Claire folded a linen towel over her arm. Most people in your board do not carry coffee trays. Who are you really? He asked. It was not suspicion now. It was wonder wrapped in restraint. Claire looked toward the city lights before answering. Someone who learned expensive lessons early. Nathan waited. Powerful men were not used to waiting for answers. Yet he did. After a moment she said quietly, "My father lost his firm because he trusted language written to be misunderstood." Nathan absorbed that without speaking. The old instinct to interrogate had gone strangely absent. Instead, he noticed the tiredness behind her composure. The way dignity can look almost identical to weariness. "And you work here because—" He stopped himself. It sounded intrusive. Claire spared him by answering anyway. Because rebuilding rarely looks glamorous from the outside. A faint sound escaped Nathan. Not quite a laugh. More recognition. "I owe you an apology." She met his eyes then, directly, and something in him seemed suddenly less armored. "For the joke in German?" she asked. "For assuming intelligence has a dress code." That made her almost smile. Almost. Then footsteps approached. The older German investor stood at the corridor entrance. "Mr. Whitmore," he said, voice softer than before, "perhaps there has been misunderstanding." Nathan looked at Claire only once before answering. "No," he said. "There has been clarity." The words landed with gentle finality. The investor withdrew. Nathan remained still after he left. "You just ended a merger," he said to Claire. She shook her head. "No." "The contract did." She turned to return inside, but Nathan noticed something slip from the folded towel in her arm. A worn fountain pen. Silver-trimmed. Old. He picked it up before she reached for it. Her expression changed, just slightly. "My father's," she said. Nathan held the pen a second longer than necessary, then placed it carefully in her hand, as though returning something fragile. Their fingers did not linger. They did not need to. Some shifts announce themselves with applause. Others happen when a man who once looked past a waitress begins handing back what she almost lost. When they returned to the dining room, the air had changed in a way no one could openly acknowledge. The contract still rested unsigned, but now it looked less like an opportunity and more like evidence. Nathan resumed his seat with unusual calm. Not the cold calm of control, but the dangerous calm of a man thinking deeper than those across from him expected. Claire moved behind the service station, yet the room seemed subtly arranged around her presence now, as if everyone sensed an unseen center had shifted. The older German investor cleared his throat. Perhaps revised language can address concerns. Nathan folded his hands. "Concerns," he said softly. "I believe attempted transfer of proprietary control deserves a stronger noun." No one answered. Even the younger investor lowered his gaze. For a long moment, only the muted piano from the bar downstairs drifted through the room. Then Nathan did something none of his legal team anticipated. He pushed the contract aside. No signatures tonight. His counsel stiffened. The investors exchanged alarm hidden beneath diplomacy. Billions could disappear through quieter words than those. Yet Nathan's attention was not on them. It moved once, almost involuntarily, toward Claire, who was polishing a wine glass she had already polished twice. The older investor rose first. "You are making a mistake." Nathan gave a faint, unreadable smile. "Not tonight." They left with measured courtesies and unsteady pride, overcoats drawn close against the storm. When the private elevator doors closed behind them, the room exhaled. Nathan remained standing beside the abandoned contract, fingertips resting on the leather folder as if considering whether to burn it or study it. Claire approached to clear the untouched coffee service. "You just walked away from $1 billion, she said without accusation. Nathan looked at the snow pressing white against the windows. "No," he replied. "I walked away from losing more." Then, after a pause, "because a waitress wrote me 3 words. Claire lowered her eyes, but not from shyness, from discomfort with praise. 3 words only matter if someone chooses to hear them. Nathan studied her. There was no triumph in her face, no hunger to be acknowledged, only a kind of quiet that made his usual instincts feel loud and clumsy. "You saved my company," he said. "I interrupted a trap," she answered. "There is a difference." Her refusal to dramatize herself unsettled him more than brilliance had. He reached for the discarded contract and, without thinking, handed it to her. "What would you have done?" It was a question Nathan Whitmore did not ask people, especially not staff. Claire hesitated before opening the folder. She turned directly to Clause 14, marked one sentence with a thumbnail, and said, "I would have asked why a deal built on partnership hides ownership language in the middle instead of the front." Nathan gave a quiet breath that almost sounded like surrender. "You should be across board tables, not carrying silver." Claire closed the folder. Sometimes life changes seats without asking permission. Before Nathan could answer, the maitre d' appeared at the doorway, astonishment poorly concealed. "Mr. Whitmore, your car is ready." Nathan nodded, but did not move. Instead, he did something so small no one but Claire fully felt its meaning. He pulled out one of the empty chairs at the negotiation table and gestured for her to sit. Claire froze. Waitresses were not invited to the table. Not in rooms like this. "Sit," he said again, almost quietly. She looked at him, then at the chair, as if measuring whether the gesture was symbolic or sincere. Then she sat. Just for a moment. Snow drifted beyond the glass. A Swiss watch ticked softly between them. No deal was signed. Yet something rarer had entered the room. Respect, when real, does not announce itself grandly. Sometimes it begins with a chair pulled back and left waiting. Claire did not sit long, just enough for the gesture to become real. Then she rose, smoothing the edge of her black uniform as if returning the room to its ordinary order. But nothing in Nathan felt ordinary anymore. He watched her carry the empty coffee service toward the kitchen and felt a thought he would once have dismissed as sentimental begin to take shape. He had spent 20 years believing value announced itself in resumes, titles, polished introductions. Yet the sharpest mind in his evening had arrived carrying a silver tray. The irony did not wound his pride. It humbled it. His phone vibrated against the linen. Messages from his board were already stacking up. Questions about the unsigned merger. Concerns. Demands. Nathan silenced the screen without reading. Another first. He picked up Claire's forgotten order slip still resting beside his cuff. The words "ask about usufruct rights" stared back in blue ink. Precise. Unadorned. He folded the paper and slipped it into his wallet where contracts usually lived. A small act. Almost unconscious. Across the room Claire returned, carrying the final check folder. She placed it beside him. "The house covered dessert," she said. Nathan looked at the untouched bill, then at her. "I did not order dessert." "No," she said softly. But sometimes a night changes the menu. It was the nearest thing to humor she had allowed. It caught him off guard enough to make him smile. A real one this time. The maitre d' pretended not to notice. "Claire," Nathan said as she turned away. She stopped. He hesitated, a rare fracture in his usually seamless confidence. 3 years ago, my company avoided a catastrophic arbitration challenge because an anonymous translator flagged a corrupted German filing before dawn. Claire said nothing. Nathan continued. Only 3 people knew. Still silence. But something in her shoulders had gone still. Too still. He studied her face. Was it you? She did not answer immediately. Instead, she glanced at the snow beyond the windows, as if the city might offer a cleaner response. Sometimes helping is easier when no one knows who helped. Nathan understood then. Not fully, but enough. The room seemed to narrow around that realization. She had saved him twice. Once without recognition. Once after being mocked. And had asked nothing either time. The old instincts in him, reward, recruit, acquire, rose and then strangely dissolved. Some people could not be possessed by opportunity. They could only be respected. He took off his Patek Philippe and set it on the table. Claire looked startled. You forgot your watch, she said. Nathan shook his head. It has been running 3 minutes fast all night. He slid it toward her. You noticed before I did. Claire touched neither watch nor meaning. I am not taking a 5-figure apology. That nearly made him laugh. Instead, he turned the watch over and adjusted the crown until the second hand aligned with the wall clock. Then he strapped it back on. A symbolic correction so quiet it would have been invisible to anyone else. Yet Claire saw. Her expression changed almost imperceptibly. Not warmth exactly. Something gentler. Recognition meeting recognition. When Nathan finally stood to leave, he reached for his coat, then paused at the chair he had pulled out for her. He pushed it back under the table himself. No staff summoned.
No gesture delegated.
Claire watched that small act. As if it mattered more than the cancelled merger. Perhaps it did. Because power reveals itself loudly. Character often in how a man handles an empty chair after everyone else has stopped looking. The elevator should have closed on the night there. It did not. Nathan stepped into the marble lobby with snow swirling beyond the revolving doors, then stopped as if some invisible thread held him in place. His driver waited curbside beside a black sedan idling under street lamps glazed in winter mist. Yet Nathan turned back toward the private elevator. The doorman looked confused. Powerful men were not known for returning once they had made exits. Upstairs, Claire was alone now, stacking menus in the dimmed dining room while staff reset tables for breakfast service. Most chandeliers had been lowered to amber pools. The city beyond looked softer, almost blurred into memory. She heard footsteps and assumed it was the maitre d' until Nathan's voice, quieter than before, entered the room. One more question. Claire turned. There was no boardroom authority left in his tone. Only something unresolved. Nathan held a leather portfolio in one hand. He set it on the table where the unsigned contract had lain. What is it? She asked. The corrected acquisition model, he said. I had legal redraft it after your notes. Claire frowned. Tonight? I have people who do not sleep when billions move. She almost smiled. Nathan opened the folder and turned it toward her. I want you to read it. Claire did not touch the pages at first. I am a waitress. Nathan leaned lightly against the chair back. Tonight you have used that line more than I have used Chief Executive Officer. I suspect neither explains enough. She finally read. Clause 14 was gone. Patent rights ring-fenced. Transfer language rewritten. Cleaner. Honest. Her eyes paused at a handwritten notation in the margin. Reviewed per CB concerns. She looked up. You put my initials in a board document? Nathan answered simply. They belong there. Silence stretched, but not the old tense kind. A gentler silence. Claire closed the folder. It will protect you. Nathan shook his head. It may protect the company. Then, after a beat, you protected me. He reached into his coat and withdrew a cream business card, placing it beside the fountain pen she had set near the bill folder. Not slid across like a transaction. Set down like an offering. No obligation, he said. But if you ever want a seat at a different table? Claire did not pick it up. She looked instead at his hands. For the first time she noticed they were not restless anymore. Not drumming, not checking time, not performing control. Simply still. Do you always recruit people by insulting them first? She asked. Nathan laughed then, unexpectedly warm, and the sound startled them both. Apparently, I am revising that strategy. Snow tapped the windows. Somewhere in the bar below, Someone tested a piano note and let it fade. Claire lifted the business card at last, studied it, then turned it over. On the back, Nathan had written one line in German. Never mock what listens quietly. Her breath caught almost invisibly. She set the card beside her father's pen. Two objects. Two worlds.
Resting parallel.
Nathan noticed, but said nothing. At the doorway he paused once more. Claire. She looked up. Why did you help me a second time, after what I said? Her answer came without ornament. Because a bad contract should not survive just because a good man was arrogant. Nathan stood very still at those words. Not because she called him good. Because she had chosen to see more in him than he had shown. When he finally left, Claire remained by the window long after the elevator doors closed. Her hand rested near the card, but not on it. Below, Nathan reached the sidewalk, then glanced up toward the 42nd floor. One lit window. One quiet figure. He did not wave. She did not move. Yet something passed in that distance more intimate than speech. Sometimes trust begins not when someone offers you a future, but when they leave after doing so, and you do not feel erased when they are gone. Morning entered the city, almost unnoticed. Not with sunlight, but with that pale silver glow winter lays over Manhattan before dawn fully commits. Claire had finished her shift hours ago, yet she had not gone home. She sat alone at a corner table before the dining room opened, her father's fountain pen beside Nathan's card, both untouched except by thought. Staff moved quietly around her, setting cutlery, folding napkins, building the ordinary shape of another day. But ordinary had become difficult to recognize. At 6:43, the television above the bar flickered to a financial news segment muted behind captions. A red banner scrolled beneath market numbers. Whitmore Capital withdraws from European merger, citing integrity concerns. Claire looked up slowly. Then another headline appeared. Whitmore announces new independent patent initiative. She stared. He had not merely walked away from the deal. He had altered strategy overnight, not patched a wound, changed direction. The maitre d', who had watched enough of the previous night to suspect history, had brushed past his restaurant, approached holding the morning paper. You may want to see page 1 of the business section. Claire unfolded it. Nathan's photograph stood beneath a headline about rejecting predatory acquisition structures. But it was the quote beneath that made her breath pause. Sustainable partnerships begin where hidden clauses end. It sounded like him, and somehow not the man who had mocked her. At 8:15, the front doors opened for breakfast service. The first guests trickled in. Lawyers, tourists, a woman in a red wool coat reading alone. Life resuming its practiced indifference. Claire tucked the newspaper beneath the service stand and tied her apron. Work remained work. Yet midway through the morning rush, a courier arrived carrying a long flat envelope addressed only to Claire Bennett. No return label. Her hands stilled before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of thick stationery embossed with Whitmore Capital letterhead. No formal offer. No contract. Just one typed sentence. The board voted unanimously this morning for an ethics review division. Your empty chair has been reserved. Beneath it, handwritten in blue ink she recognized from the business card. Some seats are earned before they are offered. Folded inside the note was something else. A photocopy of an old arbitration filing from 3 years ago, with one anonymous translator comment highlighted in yellow. Her own words. Preserved.
Kept.
Nathan had found it.
Kept it.
For reasons she could not yet name, that moved her more than the invitation. She slid the papers back into the envelope just as the lunch rush began building. By noon, snow had stopped. Light broke through the windows in long pale bands. And then, as if the story refused spectacle even at its highest turn, Nathan returned without entourage, without reservation, wearing a navy overcoat dusted with melting frost. He took table 7. Alone. Claire approached with a water glass, professional as ever. Good afternoon, Mr. Whitmore. Nathan looked up. I was hoping for the waitress who edits mergers. Claire almost smiled. She is covering lunch. He opened the menu and closed it again.
Coffee, he said.
Fresh. She brought it. Set it down. Neither mentioned the envelope. Neither mentioned the board vote. Instead, Nathan glanced toward the empty chair opposite him, the one no one had taken. "Will someone be joining you?"
Claire asked.
Nathan looked at her for a moment longer than etiquette required. "I believe I am waiting to see." Then he slid the cream business card back across the table toward her, but something had changed. This time on the back, she noticed one added line beneath the German sentence. "The door remains open." Claire did not answer. She placed the card beside the check presenter and moved away to another table. Yet when she passed the window, she adjusted one chair at Nathan's table almost imperceptibly, turning it slightly outward, as if no longer pushed fully in. Nathan noticed, said nothing. Some invitations are accepted long before anyone speaks them aloud. Claire did not sit at table 7 that afternoon. Not then. She moved through lunch service as she always had, carrying plates, refilling water, speaking softly to strangers who would never know they were dining inside the quiet aftermath of something rare. Nathan remained over coffee long after it had cooled, saying little, watching the room with an unfamiliar patience. Once, when Claire passed near the window, winter light caught the silver trim of her father's fountain pen tucked into her apron pocket. Nathan noticed. His hand moved toward his watch, then stopped, as if remembering there was no need to measure this moment. Around 3, the lunch crowd thinned. Chairs emptied. Glassware stilled. The pianist downstairs touched a slow melody and let it drift upward through the floorboards. Claire approached with the check folder. Nathan opened it, placed his card inside, then paused. Instead of closing it, he reached for the pen in her apron. She hesitated only a breath before handing it to him. He signed, then wrote something beneath the receipt total, folded the bill, returned the pen with both hands, almost ceremonially. Claire waited until he had stood and put on his coat before opening the folder. There was no number added beyond the charge. No grand gesture. Only one handwritten line at the bottom of the receipt. "Keep the chair turned outward." She looked up. Nathan was already at the door. Snowmelt dripped from the awning outside. For a moment, he rested his hand on the brass handle and turned back, not fully, only enough for his eyes to find hers across the room.
No smile. No promise spoken.
Just a look held long enough to become memory. Then he left. Days passed. Then weeks. Winter softened. The city changed coats. One quiet Thursday before opening, Claire arrived to find table 7 reserved with no name, only a small card resting upright beside the salt cellar. She touched it. The same cream stock. Same blue ink. Noon. If you are free. She did not move for several seconds. At 11:58, she adjusted the empty chair herself, the one she had once angled slightly outward. At noon, Nathan arrived carrying no portfolio, no phone in hand, only a folded newspaper under one arm. He stopped when he saw the chair already pulled back. Something almost invisible passed through his face. Surprise touched by gratitude. Claire did not wait for him to ask. She removed her apron, folded it over the service station, and crossed the room. No one announced anything. No one watched for long. She sat. The pianist below found the same slow melody again. Nathan placed the newspaper between them, on the margin of the business section, beside an article about ethical trade reform. He had circled a single phrase and underlined it twice. Language shapes trust. Claire looked at it, then at him. She turned the paper over and wrote one word beneath it in German. Zuhören. Listening. Nathan read it and gave the faintest nod, as if accepting terms in a negotiation no lawyers would ever touch. Outside, spring rain began tapping softly where winter once had. The waitress brought 2 coffees without being asked.
Fresh.
Steam rose between them. Neither reached for it immediately. Their hands rested near the cups, near but not touching, while conversation had not yet begun and somehow did not need to. Across the room, the old chair at table 7 remained turned slightly outward. It never quite returned to its original place. Years later, some said Whitmore Capital's best decision was the merger never signed. Others pointed to reforms that followed. But in that quiet room, none of those things were the true reversal. It was a chair once offered in humility and one day accepted without ceremony. Some truths do not arrive when someone speaks them. They arrive when two people finally learn how to keep silence together.